This is VikesNow, and I am Dustin Baker. This is the July 11th edition, Monday, and this one will be a fun episode because it's my forte. It's Vikings stats. That's how I broke into this space, was posting as random Viking stats as you could find ad nauseum in the spring of 2020. And this will always be my bedrock, the numbers for the Vikings. So I want to share some items. So what happened was I went through and I pulled all of Mike Zimmer's rankings from his 8 years for an article on Vikings territory. And what I want to do in this episode is highlight some of the areas that Kevin O'Connell can maintain and some of the obvious ones that can be fixed. So there are a litany. This would happen with any coach turnover. You'd have stuff that you want to keep, and then you have stuff that you want to fundamentally repair. So we're going to get into those. And just a note for those who watch this on a daily basis. I don't know how many of yous there are, but I will be gone on Friday for 9 days. I'm taking the family to Hawaii with my dude Wes Johnson, who writes for Vikings Territory. We're going to hang out there for a week. So I got, 4 more episodes this week before I depart. If that matters to you at all, there it is on the table. So let's go through the stuff that Kevin O'Connell must maintain as the skipper of the Vikings. Some of these will be obvious to you, so bear with me. And the first one is Captain Obvious, and that is the defense. Before you start screaming about how this defense isn't good, I want to preface this that prior to 2020, the Vikings defense was absolutely marvelous, especially compared to the rest of the NFL. Because of some recency bias, the last 2 seasons, it hasn't been. And particularly in big spots, the Vikings defense has collapsed. It just doesn't look the same. It doesn't feel the same. So yes, I will concede that the Vikings defense is no longer the standard bearer, and that anything O'Connell will do with Ed Donatel this season pretty much just has to be average to feel better than the last 2 seasons. I get it. But if you want to adjudicate a coach or a player, you should do so on the basis of their entire resume. And for Zimmer, the Vikings defense as a product of 8 years was absolutely marvelous. I know it's tricky to stomach right now, but on the whole, from 2014 to 2019, 6 seasons, fantastic. So by the numbers, even with the shitty 2 final seasons under Zimmer, the Vikings ranked number 1 from 2014 to 2021 in defensive third down conversion percentage. That is, they stopped opponents on third down better than any other team in football in the last 8 years. We grew accustomed to it, that rip-roaring defense, especially in 2017, that set records at the time. I think it was bested since by the Patriots. But the third down defense, on the whole, under Mike Zimmer, was as good as you can get. Now, in the last 2 years, not quite as good, but it's still been a calling card. Even when the defense has struggled in the last 2 years, the third down efficacy and efficiency is still there somehow. Just resulted in a 7-9, 8-9 season, so it doesn't feel that way. So third down conversion percentage, if O'Connell can emulate that with Ed Donatel at all, the Zimmer standard, the Vikings will be in good shape. On the topic of defense, overall in the last 8 years, the Vikings rank second in touchdowns allowed. The fewest. It's a good stat. So if the new gang can get close to that, probably won't be able to do it for an offense-first head coach, but maintaining some standard of defense like Zimmer did for especially 6 seasons, 8 altogether, would be advantageous. And then one final stat on the defense from 2014 to 2021 per EPA per play. That's the defensive efficiency metric from Ben Baldwin's website. The Vikings ranked 4th in all 8 seasons. And when you look back at the Zimmer era or however many years down the line, you evaluate how O'Connell did. The Vikings defense was the 4th best per defensive efficiency, even with the startlingly bad seasons in 2020 and 21, especially with the collapses in the last couple minutes of halves, which drove me nuts, and I'm sure it drove you nuts. So that's number 1. Maintain the Zimmer standard on defense. We know that won't happen to the tune of the 2017 or 2018 defense, but keep it respectable. And with a new 3-4 scheme, who knows? Perhaps it'll be even better than the last 2 years, which would give you warm fuzzies. So defense, Captain Obvious one. The rest of them aren't like duh, but they're important. O'Connell must maintain the clip of turnovers in terms of not giving the ball up. Even when things got rotten in these last 2 years, the Vikings didn't turn the ball over very much. It was one of the most frustrating aspects of the 2021 season was they're not turning the ball over. They're stopping people on third down. They're making some big plays, Justin Jefferson, but still, they're not very good. It was bizarre. From 2014 to 2021, the Vikings handed the ball to opponents via turnover, the fourth least or fourth fewest in the NFL. So we got used to that. Cousins doesn't throw a lot of picks. He's reduced his fumble problem. And the rest of the team doesn't fumble like crazy people. So the task here is to keep the turnovers low because at the end of almost any single NFL season, if you pull up the teams that win the turnover battle or simply the teams that don't turn it over very much, usually they're going to the postseason. So we've grown accustomed to few turnovers because that was the Zimmer style. For God's sakes, don't turn over the ball. It was kind of why he was sour on Case Keenum, who played like a playground quarterback. We got used to it. So we have to hope that the new guys do that too. Otherwise, if they start turning the ball over, then you got to make up for it in other ways. And that's usually on defense or with just outscoring everybody with like a Kurt Warner-like Rams team. And I don't know if these guys are quite that good. The next one is penalties. This is going to have the same caveat as look at the Zimmer product on the whole. I know last year was no good for penalties, especially the right guard. There were a lot of penalties last year, but that was new for the Zimmer brand of Vikings. Ranking near the bottom of the league for penalties was brand new, and it was weird. From 2014 to 2020, the Vikings really weren't penalized that much. And in Zimmer's 8 seasons, the Vikings were the 6th least penalized team. So what you watched from the dawn of the Teddy Bridgewater era to, I guess, the end of the Anthony Barr era was relatively few penalties, and they would be best served to keep that up. Now, because last year was not good at all in that regard, the standard won't be too crazy to meet. So defense, limit turnovers on offense, and few penalties. That's what the Zimmer brand was for the most part. And then the last one is a no-brainer, and I've said this before, and in some Vikings territory writings, is win percentage. No matter what you think of Zimmer, he fostered the Vikings to the 10th best record during his 8 seasons, which doesn't grow on trees. He didn't close the deal at all. No Super Bowl appearances, 2 playoff wins and 3 trips. So, but at the end of the day, you're used to either going to the game on Sundays or watching it in your living room or basement. And the Vikings were better than, 22 other teams in the last 8 years per win percentage. So this is a no-brainer. Of course, O'Connell has to win. If he doesn't, he'll be shown the door. But I want to point out that even with Zimmer's downfall in the last 2 seasons, this descent into mediocrity, they still, in 8 years, were the 10th winningest franchise. And that's the litmus test for O'Connell. Can you be better than Zimmer? Because otherwise you might as well kept the old stubborn man, huh? All right, so that's the maintain. Here is the exciting stuff that the Vikings can fix. Unsurprisingly, the first one is kicking. Field goal kicking and extra point kicking. During the Zimmer 8 seasons, the Vikings ranked 27th in the NFL in converting field goals. That's 6th worst. You count backward from 32. They rank second to last in extra point conversion, only better than the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then in field goal kicking against or field goal kicking allowed, extra points allowed, Minnesota ranked dead last in both metrics under Mike Zimmer. It's like an eerie, unexplainable phenomenon that some will call curse. If it feels like other teams make kicks, field goals, and extra points against the Vikings more so than other teams or other games that you watch, you are vindicated. The numbers bear it out. Teams, compared to the rest of the NFL, all 31 other teams, they don't miss kicks very much against the Vikings. Vikings rank dead last in this little stat called field goal percentage allowed and extra point conversion percentage allowed since 2014. And it's mind-boggling. I get it. I feel it in my bones. When a kick goes up in the air and it's the other team kicking it, I'm like, well, this son of a bitch is going in. And it does. It does more so against the Vikings than any other team who has field goals and extra points kicked against them. How do you fix that? I don't know. But they can reasonably fix the field goal kicking on their own behalf and the extra point kicking. Greg Joseph will get another shot at it. We'll hope that his redemptive tale last year carries over because it didn't get off to a good start in week 2. There's always week 2 undoings for Vikings kickers. Remember Daniel Carlson in 2018? That was week 2. And then down in the desert against the Cardinals, the Vikings had a chip shot to win. They did not. But thankfully for Joseph's sake, he made the best of the rest of his campaign, and it's probably why he's the incumbent kicker again, unless they do something funky in free agency that none of us foresee at the moment. But yeah, a big flashing billboard. If O'Connell and his coaching staff can change the voodoo surrounding Vikings kicking for and against, you'll stand up and applaud. You'll build the statue because the last 8 years of field goal kicking, extra point kicking have been putrid. End of story. The next one is also a little bit of an obvious. It's throw the football more. Now, I was reared in the football fandom in the 80s and especially the 1990s where you ran the football and played defense. So that's in my DNA. That's why I didn't have any qualms with Zimmer as the coach. And on Sundays, it usually worked the way he did it because of the aforementioned 10th best win percentage. However, it's important to adapt with the times and to embrace change. So if you're going to hire an offense-first head coach, you might as well throw the football like the rest of the world is doing. Each year, the amount of passes thrown in the NFL escalates. During the Zimmer era, the Vikings ranked 28th in the NFL in pass attempts. That's 5th fewest. If it felt like the Vikings were a run-first organization, it's because they were, and they advertised it. Now, with the run-first boss on his ranch in Kentucky, or wherever that is, they should throw the ball more because they threw it 5th least in the last 8 seasons. I know there's a lot of numbers coming at you. Hopefully this isn't annoying you too much. But this one is simple. Throw the football more because the world is mandating it. The rules are relaxed against quarterbacks, and you can't drill wide receivers coming over the middle. Get in on the fun and throw the football more than the last 8 years because the clip at which you threw before, you ranked 28th in pass attempts, and that ain't it. It's not going to work anymore. Maybe outlying times, run-first teams will break through. We don't have to worry about it anymore because you have a coach that's a quarterback, and he comes from a pass-first organization with the Los Angeles Rams. Rounding out the show, I have 2 more things for O'Connell and Donatell in this case to fix. It's rushing yards allowed. Now, this is very weird. So all of those fancy stats I talked about at the top of the show with number 1 third down conversion percentage, 2nd fewest touchdowns allowed, 4th best per defensive efficiency. The Vikings' rushing defense under Zimmer was really never that good. In 8 years, from 2014 to 2021, the Vikings ranked 20th in rushing yards allowed. It was always this dirty little secret that you could sign 2 nose tackles in Dalvin Tomlinson and Michael Pierce, but they wouldn't fix the run defense, at least last year. So if Ed Donatell can clog the middle with this new 3-4 system, Harrison Phillips up there, perhaps Armin Watts, Dalvin Tomlinson's back, even under a defense-first coach who was supremely good for his first 6 seasons, the Vikings never really stopped the run like a defense-first coach should. So, with a new pair of eyes, several eyes in the coaching staff, some new personnel, Jordan Hicks, Lewis Seen, Andrew Booth, perhaps they can get back to the middle of the pack or even be good in rushing yards allowed because it's very odd that quietly the Vikings' run defense was never all that great. It was always his love for cornerbacks, and he's a defensive backs coach at heart. You remember him with the Cowboys. He was on the team that Randy Moss exploited on Thanksgiving. Zimmer, he was the coach, defensive backs during that game. So it was always the Vikings' pass defense and getting sacks too. They always sacked at an impressive clip. That's another one I could have put at maintain. I believe in Zimmer's 8 years, the Vikings ranked 4th in sacks of quarterbacks. So yes, improve the rush defense because it was really never all that great. And if you're like me, I think I've said this before, maybe it was on the podcast with McKinney, that last year we got to a point that if the opposing team had a handoff and ran the ball, I would get excited if they only gained 4 or 5 yards. And I'm like, this isn't the way they're supposed to be because these chunk yards would be chipped off by these running backs, whether they were good or not. 7 yards here on first down, 2nd and 3, and it just make you roll your eyes to the back of your head. Rushing yards allowed, get that fixed. All right, the final one is that needs improvement is third down conversion percentage on offense. On the whole, for Zimmer during his tenure, the Vikings were right in the middle of the NFL for converting third downs in offense. They ranked 16th for the percentage. However, last year, Kirk Cousins and friends ranked 26th in offensive third down conversion percentage. And that is the number one reason reason why the Vikings offense never really felt great last year. It had the numbers: Cousins 33 touchdowns, 7 picks, Justin Jefferson setting records out the wazoo, Dalvin looks pretty good. The reason that it never felt like a well-oiled machine is because the son of a bitch would stall. At the worst possible times, vanilla play calling would ensue. And third down, they had a hell of a time converting on third down. 26th in the league equals 7th worst in the NFL. And then, of course, they led the NFL in 3 and outs. So it was these stagnant periods, almost unexplainable, but probably derived from a first-year offensive coordinator in Clint Kubiak. So third down conversion percentage on offense wasn't terrible under Mike Zimmer. However, last year, when everything kind of went off the rails and he doesn't work here anymore, the third down conversion percentage was not good, especially for an offense that was pretty damn prolific otherwise, with Thielen catching touchdowns and Jefferson 1,616 receiving yards. It was plagued by ruts, and a lot of that had to do with third down conversion percentage and 3 and outs. So that is it. Let me go down the list. Maintain things that O'Connell can do that Zimmer did well. Defense in general, especially third down conversion percentage defensively. Limit the turnovers. Zimmer was a master at that. The offense didn't turn the ball over very much. And then penalties. Before things got bad last year, the Vikings were not penalized very often from 2014 to 2020. And then obviously win percentage. If Zimmer held the 10th best standard, then O'Connell has to do at least that and hopefully better. Things to fix. Write it down. The kicking, the field goal kicking, the extra points on their behalf, and somehow repair how teams with ease seamlessly convert kicks against the Vikings. Throw the ball more. Didn't throw the ball very much during the Zimmer era, 28th in total pass attempts. Rushing yards allowed. The Vikings' run defense was never great with Zimmer. It was just masked by sacks and good cornerbacks in Harrison Smith. And then third down conversion percentage on offense wasn't good last year, was average under Zimmer. If that can take the next step and get into the top 10, you should have a playoff team on your hands. I'll be back tomorrow with VikesNow, and then Wednesday we'll be joined by Josh Fry in our weekly segment with that gentleman. Skol, baby.